Hello, everybody, and welcome to Shred's Takes. I'm Mike Shredder, your host for this podcast. I'm joined by a fellow grad student of mine and a good buddy, Julian Epps. Julian, thanks for joining the podcast today.
Of course, of course. Glad we finally got this done. Excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Me as well, for sure. And for those who don't know, Julian went to Cornell and he's in the sports management program, like I said, with me. And he's a big Knicks fan. So we're going to be talking a lot about the Knicks, who have right now been 16-2 in their last 18 games. And with the OG Anunoby trade, they've been 15-2 in January. So they've been rolling in the right direction. But my first question, I guess, goes with that is, what do you think's been working so well with the Knicks? Because they've been winning even without Julius Randle in the lineup, which hopefully he'll come back maybe after the All-Star break at some point. But in your opinion, what do you think's been working for them, and why the OG Anunoby trade has proven to be really a great move by Leon Rose and the team there?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely starts with that trade. Um, Definitely had my thoughts about it before it happened. RJ and Quickly were two of my favorite players on the team, probably my two favorite players. And I was really sad to see him go. A lot of emotions were involved in that off the rip. So that was tough. But when I stepped back and really thought about it, it made sense from a financial standpoint. And then we get a guy like OG Anunoby, who's just like a standard Tibbs kind of guy. Plays great defense, hustles really hard, is great in transition, can knock down the three ball. And what I think happened with that trade is that it really increased the ball movement on the team. RJ and Quickly are definitely, ball dominant guys. They need the ball in their hand a lot to either drive or, create their own shot from mid or from three. So OG's a guy who can really play off the ball well. He's a strong guy. He can set some good screens. Pick and pop action has been working really well. He'll spot up in a corner and knock down a 30 when you need it, and he'll go out and guard the opposing team's best player. So it's kind of a perfect guy. I mean, I think the Knicks really, their identity is just grit, and it's just like a fact of New York is that like you need grit in order to play there. And Tibbs has constructed a roster of guys who play really hard, definitely making all the energy plays, getting extra rebounds, fighting for loose balls, tooth and nail. And OG definitely fits that mold. Not to say that RJ and Quickly didn't, but the way that he just frees up the floor while being able to be a Tibbs style of player has just been great for the team, and it's freed up a lot of opportunities on the offensive end. Brunson, Randall are obviously playing great. Like Bench is playing great. Dante DiVincenzo's playing great. So yeah, no, I mean, I'm glad I'm not the GM because I wouldn't have made that trade, and obviously it's worked out. So
Yeah, I think the interesting thing now is just, again, they're only like a half a game or a game back from the Bucks for the second seed, which who would have thought if we were here 5 years ago, you would be saying 5 years from now, the Knicks have a chance to be a contending team in the Eastern Conference. Like, I wouldn't have said that was going to be anywhere near the case. Not because it's just the talent wasn't necessarily there. We didn't really, I think Tibbs has been the right coach for this team in terms of just his ability to get the most out of them. But let's take a little moment to acknowledge, I think, one of the best point guards in the NBA, and that is Jalen Brunson. Still, I think, so underrated. I think people still don't really appreciate what he's been doing this season. During this win streak, I saw he's averaging 32.6 points a game in like the last 9 games. Talk about like when you saw that whole initial trade happen with Jalen Brunson going to Knicks. A, did you expect this? I'm assuming the answer is no, but like if you did, good for you. And I think the second thing too is like what have you seen from him this year? Because I even think he's taken a step above even where he was last year as well. So talk a little bit about Jalen Brunson. Like, were you expecting this type of play? And so why do you think he's produced at such a high level?
yeah, 100%. So I think as Knicks fans, we're often very delusional, and we think we know what's best. We highly criticize every single move the front office makes. We've done that for years, and we sometimes don't admit when we're wrong. But I'm standing in front of you today admitting that I was definitely wrong about Jalen Brunson when he came to the team. I was not super excited. Obviously I knew he was good. Played really well on that Mavericks team under Luka and had a great playoff stretch, but I really didn't think he could be the guy, that 1A that people have been talking about recently that he's grown into. I didn't anticipate that at all. But he's just been great. I mean, it goes back to what I was saying before of just how, Tibbs constructs his roster, and really brings out the best of guys who have that New York grit. And Jalen Brunson absolutely has that. He never shies away from the big moments. We want the ball in his hands when, the big shots are coming up. Um, and he just really controls that offense really well. I mean, his playmaking is an underrated aspect of his game too. His assist numbers have definitely improved over the years. He's, you know, finding his own offense in the role, but also, you know, bringing the best out of the other players, which I think is probably the most important aspect of a point guard on a team, and especially in today's NBA. And yeah, man, he's just been great. Like, I think I really, obviously, he played great last season. I think it really hit me um, in that Heat series last year. I know we lost, but he played great. Like, he, you know, never backed down from the challenge. I mean, things weren't going well in that series, but he always put his best foot forward and always on to the next play if things didn't go right. And I really appreciate that about him. And then this year, I mean, he's obviously taking a leap. I think it's just because it's his second year, so people are used to, you know, what he can do. At first, it was kind of a shock, but now people are like, all right, like the consistency is there. He's doing it throughout the season. He has a chance to. He's an all-star, but he has a chance to be an All NBA caliber player, second or first team, I think. And we'll see what he does in the playoffs. I mean, that's obviously the ultimate test. People are always going to, you know, criticize players on their playoff success, and we've seen it across the league with Embiid and Tatum and whatnot. But I think, you know, the way this roster is constructed and how he's leading us right now, we've got a great chance. I mean, I don't think anyone wants to see us right now in the NBA. So things are going well, and he's leading the effort too.
Yeah, and I guess my follow-up to that is, what do you think is the potential obstacle with the Knicks roster for them to be able to get by a Milwaukee, a Boston, you know, Philly if Embiid's healthy, you know, Cleveland. I'm saying like those are kind of the top teams outside the Knicks right now. I really look at it as Milwaukee and Boston, obviously, but what do you think are some potential obstacles with their roster? Not like those teams that they're playing against, but like obstacles with their roster.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think, you know, when we matched up against the Bucks and the Celtics this year, it was prior to the OG Anunoby trade. So I'd like to see. I think we're done playing the Bucks now. We played them like 5 times already, so I think we're done with them. But I think we've got like at least one more Celtics game or maybe two. So I'm interested to see how it goes post trade. Um, Honestly, I don't see a lot of gaps in the roster, but you know, we're dealing with injuries. You know, Julius Randle's hurt, Mitch is out for the season. Maybe we'll come back by playoff time. We'll see. And Hardenstein's been doing great in filling in that role. So I think that from a big perspective, I was hesitant, you know, after the Achua trade. We can talk about that later. I'm not the hugest Achua fan, but you know, he definitely showed some signs of being great. So I think from the big man position, we're fine. I think the issue right now is really the bench. The bench has been playing great, but I think down the stretch, you know, maybe one night Brunson doesn't have it, or Randall's out, or one of our main scorers isn't really, you know, doesn't have it that night. We really needed a spark plug off the bench, and that's the role that IQ had on the team. And obviously now the bench guys are getting more minutes. Like Deuce McBride's been playing great, Grimes been playing great, but I still think we need a bona fide scorer who can really get the ball in his hands and just create his own shot and make it tough on the defenses. So I think that's one thing that they're considering during the trade deadline is what I've seen is just finding that scorer. I've seen a couple names pop up. I've seen Bogdanovich pop up. I know the Pistons value him pretty highly though. Alex Burks has popped up, obviously familiar with Tibbs and the scheme. I've even seen Jordan Clarkson, who's obviously, you know, just a professional scorer. He's great off the bench. So I really think we need to bolster the bench offense. Um, I think like when I saw that was definitely in the Magic game. We were playing the Magic at home, and I think Brunson was out for that game, and he just like, and we just like couldn't generate any offense in the fourth quarter, and so we really need someone who can, you know, step in when the starters are maybe not having it or they're not even playing to just score and make it tough on the defense. So that's what I think. I mean, I've seen a lot of rumors also about shaking up the starting lineup and making a huge trade at the deadline. And my opinion on that is that I don't think that's necessary given how we're playing. I think we really just need to bolster up the bench. But I've seen even big names as big as LeBron in those talks. So
I have too.
there's definitely yeah, exactly. So there's definitely like there's something missing. In my opinion, it's the bench. It's the scoring off the bench. But you know, everyone has their own opinion. But yeah, it's just mine.
I actually agree with you on that. I think it's definitely the bench. I think the starters are actually, I mean, the reason I didn't mention, I think before, the reason I think this starting lineup works well is because Randall, and as you made a great point earlier, Randall and Brunson are very ball dominant players. So you need like guys around that, like the way DiVincenzo's been playing. Hardenstein's like a very good player to play with like ball dominant guys because he's a good passer, kind of gets a lot of points just off dump offs. And Anunoby's a great cutter, actually. I think that's like an underrated part of his game is he really knows how to move off the ball when Randall's getting into a post up and driving or Brunson's trying to create offense. I do think the bench, it's more, I think that they have to show me they can prove it. I think, as you kind of mentioned, in a 7 game series where it's more, hey, you know what? Like, can Quentin Grimes, Deuce McBride, Josh Hart, Precious Achiuwa, can those guys consistently give me solid offensive minutes in a big playoff series against a Milwaukee or a Boston? Because I do think that both of those teams, I don't know how you feel about it, but I do think Boston and Milwaukee have major flaws. Boston's not played well recently, and they always have a tendency to get to the Eastern Conference Finals and not win it. And then you got the Bucks who can't really guard anybody, and I think their chemistry is just not there. And obviously, getting a new head coach and Doc Rivers, I think that's going to change things up. So, in terms of looking at those two teams, do you agree that like they are, like the Knicks could totally, can compete and potentially win a 7 game series against those teams, or is that, as you mentioned before, the delusional Knicks fan thinking?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that's definitely the question that's definitely on top of my mind as we head towards like the latter half of the season after the All-Star break. Um, I think that in a 7 game series, we have a shot. I think we could definitely make it a tough series. I don't want to go out outright and say that we're definitely going to win that series. I mean, those teams are great, especially the Celtics. Like they're obviously in a bit of a slump now, but still one of the best records in the NBA, if not the best. You got to check on that. But Tatum and Brown, whenever you have two guys like that on the same team who can score at 3 levels, play great defense, you got guys like Derek White who are filling in the gaps and doing whatever it takes to win, and Drew Holiday just locking up your best offensive player. That's always tough to beat. And then the addition of Porzingis makes it extremely difficult to get anything done interior and to guard on the perimeter because you have to deal with this three as well. So there's a lot to think about there. But I feel like our defense is extremely stout and that we're also a very versatile defense. So I personally feel we match up well against them. So I could see a game going to like 6 or 7, and it's kind of a toss up as to who wins that. But if we're healthy, and Tibbs has drawn up the right game plan, I think we have definitely have a chance of beating the Celtics. And the Bucks, I think, are just a slight tick below the Celtics. So I would say it's a similar situation with them. Obviously, they're figuring their own things out. They've got a new head coach in now with Doc Rivers, and they're kind of moving forward with him. But I think they're still a force to be reckoned with. Dame Lillard and Giannis are obviously fantastic players. It's just, as you mentioned, their defense is taking a hit. And our offensive players are playing fantastic. I'm not sure if you've been, keeping up with Dante DiVincenzo in particular. Like his 3 ball is off. I thought he should have been in the 3-point contest. He's absurd.
Oh my God, yeah.
That's another signing that I just had no idea like would have this sort of
He
impact,
averaged like five
which
points
goes to show.
with the Warriors last year. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Go ahead.
crazy. But yeah, no, I mean, we've got guys like that who make it really tough on any defense. And if you're not bringing your A game on defense, we'll definitely give you a tough time. So I think we match it better against them than the Celtics. The Celtics would definitely be a huge challenge. They're obviously finals favorites. But yeah, I think we match up well. I think it can go to 6 or 7 games, and who wins that is, I guess we'll see. Hopefully, we see it this offseason or this playoff season.
Yeah, I think I actually would agree. I think Milwaukee's a little bit better of a matchup. I just think from a standpoint of the guards who can defend Jalen Brunson are just, even though Lillard is as good or better offensively, just like in terms of his pass and that type of thing. This year, actually, I would argue Brunson's been more efficient, but that's a different story. I'm saying that based on this, that situation, defensively, Lillard's not like I don't think he's as bad a defender as people say he is. I just don't think he's not Drew Holiday or Derek White. That's the point I make. He's like
Right.
like those are the two of the best perimeter to guard defenders in the NBA, and that's a big difference. I think that also when it comes to like Giannis, I think would do a decent job in Julius Randle. But Julius Randle, to his credit, has played well against the Bucks whenever they played against the Bucks this year.
Yep.
And I know the playoffs he's not been great, but I think honestly the fit though this year could allow him to play better because he has now more space to operate offensively, where those double teams aren't going to be as effective. Because if DiVincenzo and Anunoby can really hit threes like that, even like Quentin Grimes, like it's harder to guard that, as you know, like if you have better spacing on offense, it's a lot
Yeah.
more difficult to guard you. I think another guy I want to talk about though, real quick, a couple of them actually are we can talk about Dr. DiVincenzo. He's one guy I definitely want to talk about. But
Yeah.
I also really want to talk about, I think, just the versatility like a guy like Josh Hart brings to the team. And because I think like he had, I think, one game recently where he had literally a triple double of 10 points, 10 rebounds, and 10 assists. It's
Yeah.
like, and some guys were joking about that. They're like, you can't get more than like, 10 points, but like but all jokes aside, like I think he and DiVincenzo have been two, and obviously Deuce McBride and Quentin Grimes have been great too. But I think those two guys have really taken my like eyes by, and I've like taken them, I think, the East by storm, especially DiVincenzo. So talk a little bit about just those guys, especially let's start with DiVincenzo, just the way he's been shooting the ball and what element you think that brings, because he's a good defender as well, but he's been putting up a lot of monster games the last couple games.
Yeah, 100%. DiVincenzo, as I mentioned before, has definitely been one of the biggest surprises for me. When I saw that signing in the offseason, I was just like, oh, yeah, I know he's like a solid role player, but didn't feel like that was what we really needed to push us over the edge, and get over that hump. But he's been fantastic. I think a part of it, too, is we've got to remember, like, these guys played on Villanova together. And that connection, like, that's a very strong connection that's obviously, had its benefits. They're very used to each other's play styles, Brunson, DiVincenzo, and Josh Hart, and they just play fantastic together, and they know each other's tendencies. They know how to bring the best out of each other, and I think that's really a major factor that's been in play. I would say for DiVincenzo, obviously his defense has been great, but his three ball has just been fantastic. He's been one of the best shooters in the league, and he's shooting at a high clip in a high volume. So you see a lot of shooters take like 3 or 4 threes a game, and they're shooting at a decent clip, but he's literally taking like 9 threes and shooting nearly 40%. I'm not exactly sure what the number is right now, but nearly 40%. Last game, he obviously shot poorly. He actually took 16 threes, which I thought was absurd. I was looking at that box score. I was like, what kind of like game plan would be drawn up for a guy to like shoot 16 threes in a game? But we won, which was good. Um, I mean, he just does whatever it takes. Like he's just a Tibbs player again. And Josh Hart, same thing. I mean, it's a little different, but his three has like tapered off a little bit. I thought he shot a little bit better last year than he has this year, but he makes an impact on the game that's just like beyond the traditional box score. Obviously, he puts up solid rebounding. He play makes. He plays great defense. He just makes the hustle plays, and he just really has the intangibles that again Tibbs looks for in players and is able to bring out. And I think that those two guys, like playing behind Brunson, like Brunson's leadership, is best case scenario, and we've obviously seen the benefit out of it.
What's funny, actually, I was just looking up the stats while you're pulling up because I was interested when you said 16 threes. So the last
Yeah,
3 games, I'm just for interest here, this is going to kind of, I think, blow your mind outside of that. So he took 16 threes against the Pacers, then he took 15 threes against the Jazz and 15 against the Hornets. But the last 4 games, here are his point totals. He had 16 against the Nuggets, 11 against the Heat, 28 against the Hornets, 33 against the Jazz, and then 20 against the Pacers. Like that, and he's having career highs in field goal percentage and 3-point percentage and points, which is just like,
yeah,
who would have thought that? I mean, when walking in, because the year before that, he was averaging like, I don't know, what was it? 9 points a game, I think it was with the Warriors. Yeah, 9 points.
yeah, for sure.
So like, I mean, let's be honest, we were like, oh, he's a good addition. Like he'll come in and start and hit some threes. Good defender. I was not expecting, like you said, 16 threes and hitting him at a high clip. And I mean, again, I think it's a credit to also how the offense is moving. Like they're leaving him open because you have to deal with what Jalen Brunson's doing all game. I mean, when Jalen Brunson's getting 40 points, it kind of is. But I will say I would argue with people. I know Damian Lillard probably made the All-Star starter because again, more established player over time, but I've argued that I think Jalen Brunson outside of Luca and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander has been, I think, the best guard I think in the NBA. And I know Halliburton's had stretches where he's looked amazing, but he's been in and out of the line with injuries. I'm saying consistently, I really do. I mean, do you feel like, in a sense that him like now being an all-star, there's going to be an extra level of motivation for him to go out there and say, look, I'm potentially a top 2 or 3 guard in this league. And I think people need to put like the Dallas Mavericks must be kicking themselves the fact that they don't have this guy with Luka right now. Even though Kyrie's great,
Yeah,
like you just sit there, like I don't know, just like talk a little bit about like just in the sense like him being an all-star. And do you feel like he's got to that point where we really can consider him with like a Luka or an SGA as one of the top guards in the league?
yeah. I mean, I think for sure. I think those two guys that you mentioned, Luka and Shea, obviously they're in another tier, in my opinion, than all the other guards. Like they're in terms of like their impact on a game. But I think the knock on them, and not to say they're not great players, but the knock on them right now is playoff success, and that's always going to be something that carries through on a player's career. Jalen Brunson hasn't had great success, but in his first year with the Knicks, like we obviously made it to the playoffs and did really well, and we're looking to do even better this year. In terms of this season, though, I think that he's definitely top three guards right now, at least in terms of playing wise. Um, the Dame Lillard All Star starter snub, like you can argue either way. I mean, as you mentioned, Damian Lillard's obviously the more established player. Brunson had slightly better numbers. I feel like Brunson's definitely better. He's been more efficient. And also one of the knocks on Brunson earlier in the trade, like last year, was a concern on defense. But I'm not sure if we're watching the same games. Personally, I feel like he has not been a defensive liability at all.
No,
In
I don't
fact, I think
either.
he's been a pretty solid defender. Obviously, he's not a Drew Holiday or a Derek White, but he's a very solid defender. He makes the hustle plays. He takes a lot of charges too, which is huge, getting extra possessions. Which those intangibles I think push him over the edge over some other guards. And I guess we'll see where his playoff success lies when he leads this team this playoff season. But I think the sky's the limit. As I said, I think he could be an All NBA second or first player if he continues to play the way he's playing. And we also have to consider the fact that he's playing at MSG in New York, and it's very tough to play here. Either you're built for it or you're not. Frankly, like that's just kind of how it is. And he's built for the big moments. He takes accountability. He wants the ball in those moments, and he's willing to put the team on his back when it matters. And it's always tough doing that in New York. I think some people kind of crumble under the pressure, to be honest, but not him. He's made for the big moment. So, playing in a big market, driving success in that big market and being the focal point of the offense and top of the list of the scouting report every single time and doing what he's doing, and without being a liability on defense, I think he's definitely up there with those guys.
Oh, absolutely. Let's talk about the last two things I want to talk about before we sign off is Isaiah Hartenstein's, I think, success filling in for Mitchell Robinson. And then I want to obviously end things off with Tom Thibodeau and what he's been able to do as a coach. But let's just talk about Isaiah Hartenstein. I mean, just like kind of pulling up like the numbers recently. He's averaging 7 points, almost 9 rebounds, shooting 62%. And, it's been a transformation because he was a guy coming off the bench, not really doing a whole lot. But he's been like fantastic defensively. He gets a lot of steals, actually, block shots. I mean, I remember the first time he played Philly after OG Anunoby, like he did a great job on Joel Embiid, which is not easy to do. So, like, talk about just what you've seen from him, because again, Mitchell Robinson, obviously, incredible offensive rebounder, good shot blocker. There's a lot of really valuable. He was a really valuable to that Knicks team. But Hartenstein's done a really good job of filling that role, in my opinion. Do you agree with that? And do you think that Hartenstein can be a guy that at least you can trust going forward and into a playoff series if Mitchell Robinson obviously is going to be out the whole rest of the season?
Yeah. So I think Hartenstein is playing his way into a massive contract. I think when you look at bigs in this league nowadays, the top tier ones obviously are dominant and they can stretch the floor. They can play make in the case of Jokic and they can pull down a bunch of boards. I think Hartenstein's obviously not an Embiid or Jokic caliber player, and I wouldn't say that he is by any means. But what he's done is he's brought exactly what this team needs, especially with Mitch being out. What Mitch brought was stout defense, good rebounding, and throwing off the opposing team's offense. And Hartenstein is doing the exact same thing, and getting the hustle plays. So he's pulling in like you'll see a game with him, he pulls down like 18 rebounds, and he'll have like 12 points and like 4 assists or something. And I think that whenever you have a stat line like that, it's hard to lose games because you're getting extra possessions, you're making plays for your teammates, and you are being reliable on the offensive end when you're really needed to in a pinch. And so I think he's playing out of his mind. I mean, I definitely love his play. We felt it when he was out for I think that one game or whatever. Other than that, he's been really durable too. Like he's a guy who just gets out there and gets after it every time down the floor. It feels like every game like he gets like some kind of like cut or something or like some kind of bruise. I don't know. Like they always like pan to him, he's like bleeding. So I think that's just like a testament to the kind of guy who he is. He just plays really, really, really hard, and like that trickles down to others. And I know Achua's come down the line now, and he's trying to learn the offense and trying to figure out where his role is. And we saw that last game where Chua put up great numbers. And I think that's definitely, I mean, I'm not in the locker room, but if I were to guess, that definitely is an impact of Isaiah Hartenstein being like, hey, like, this is kind of our role in this offense. Like, this is what we need to do. Like, we got to go out there and do that night after night after night. And that's what he's been able to bring to this team. So it's been great. Love it.
Yeah, and then I think it falls to the ending question, which is Tom Thibodeau has just I have been a guy who really has been impressed by what he's done with the Knicks. And I know some people are like, he plays his players too many minutes in the regular season. I sit there, I'm like, well, we're trying to win games. I actually, even though yes, maybe some guys get tired later on. But I think he's like defensively, we've been an excellent team. Rebounding, I think in terms of just like bringing discipline, accountability, and toughness, he's done a great job with that. That's what his mark's been. And to his credit, I mean, this team has embraced him and embraced the culture that I think he's trying to set. But just talking about like what you've seen from him and as a coach, and maybe not just in the past years, but especially this year, because I think he's taken a big step forward. I think this year as well in the way he's run sets and the way he's making adjustments and that type of thing. So, what are your thoughts about Thibodeau this year?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think he's definitely a coach of the year candidate. Just being able to bring together this group of guys and create an identity for the team, I think, is the most important aspect of a coach. I was looking at the Hornets game the other day, and I'm not sure if you were watching, but their coach got ejected, and then they panned to the bench, and you just saw like, because he was like arguing for a tech or something, and the coach got ejected, and they panned to the bench, and you had like LaMelo and whoever else just like laughing, and it's like, dude, like your coach is like putting it all on the line and like vouching for you and got kicked out, obviously, but you're just gonna like laugh at him while you're down like 30 to the Knicks. Um, the thing is that'll never happen on the Knicks. Like Tom Thibodeau has created a culture where these guys know that they have to put it all on the floor every day. And that's where it really starts. And you see that trickle down. We've talked about all the players and what they bring, and I think that's really at the core of it. Obviously, he's a defensive minded coach. And I think before the trade, our defense had really tapered off. Teams were just kind of getting whatever they wanted on us from three, from on the interior, whatever. And I think that's when he was like, okay, I think we need to make a change, because if the defense isn't going, then something's definitely not working, because that's the focal point of his coaching. So if the defense is not working, then something's definitely not working. You got to make a change. And obviously, been great since. Defense has been great. And I think, he doesn't get enough credit for his offense. Like finding an offense that works for Brunson and Randall, I don't think is an easy job to do by any means, but he's definitely figured it out. Figured out a way for those two ball dominant guys to, work well together and incorporate their teammates to drive success. He's been doing a great job. I think, one knock on him that people usually say is that he kind of runs his players into the dirt. They blame him a lot for D Rose's injury. And you can say what you want about it, like with his short 9-man roster and whatnot, and how like starters play a lot of minutes. But that just shows how much trust he puts into his best players to go out there and get buckets and generate offense. And I think that you need to have the faith and allow players to get in the game and stay there in order for them to build up momentum and really gain that confidence. So I personally don't have an issue with it. And I don't think, obviously we're dealing with injuries right now. I don't think injuries have been a huge issue. I mean, that this location on Julius's shoulder had nothing to do with his minutes played. It's just he fell on it the wrong way. And Mitch has obviously dealt with his own injury problems. So I think he's been doing a great job, and I'm really happy to have him as a coach here. People obviously criticize him when we lose and love him when we win. But if you just look at his track record, he's done a great job.
100%. And I think that's a great way to kind of end it off. And, we're definitely going to do this again, by the way, after the All-Star break. We can definitely do another recap, maybe going into the playoffs and how we're feeling about the Knicks at this point. But for, on behalf of me, I loved having you on today. I know we've been talking about this for a while, so I'm glad we actually made it happen. Glad we put it together. And this was great. I'm glad you're able to, definitely share some good knowledge with the viewers here too. And obviously I'll see you on Monday in class, but this was a lot of fun.
Yes, sir. No, I appreciate it. This was awesome. I've never done this before, so a lot of fun. Yeah, happy to do this anytime. I'll always talk basketball. I love it. So let me know. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So for everybody, Mike Shredder for Shred Stakes, Julian Epps was my guest today. We talked about the Knicks. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.